And today, welcome to this presentation today. It is a presentation part of a series of seminars whose theme is Emerging Horizons of Historical and Archaeological Research in Kenya. The presenter of today is Ms. Tabitha Wangari Ndogoto. The topic she's going to present is the role of museum exhibits in archaeological public education, a general overview. Ms. Tabitha is a PhD student in our Department of History and Archaeology, JON. Tabitha holds a Master of Arts degree in archaeology from the University of Nairobi. She also holds a Bachelor of Arts in Archaeology and Sociology, University of Nairobi. I'm proud that I was one of her teachers in her studies. And now, Tabitha will focus on the role of museum exhibits in archaeological public education. The paper addresses a wide range of exhibits like portraits, artifacts in glass encasements, and how they enhance learning within a museum setting. So maybe let me say something before she presents to introduce you to what she's going to talk about. Public education is a major aspect of archaeology. It aims at teaching people, especially non-archaeologists and the general public, about the value of archaeology and archaeological heritage. Public education in archaeology is important because we need to account to the public who are who are the taxpayers. We also need to account to our funders so that they know what we do. We also need to educate the public so that they can be able to help. An informed public can help to preserve heritage in a better way than an uninformed public. She's also going to talk about the museums, how it does this. The most important role of museums, it can be argued that it's that one of education. Indeed, one of the core roles of the museum is that of educating the general public. Therefore, that's why the museum is very important. Exhibitions, how do they come in? Exhibition, which in the context of this public display of archaeological findings, is a channel that museums use to educate the public. So, Ms. Tabitha, I hope you are going to give us a picture of public education, especially in Kenya, because you have done some research. We hope to get a better picture of the status of knowledge, especially the general public and so on. Welcome, Ms. Tabitha. If you have.
Good afternoon. My name is Tabitha Wangari Ndogoto. I will be presenting a paper in the discipline of archaeology. And the title of my paper is The Role of Museum Exhibitions in Archaeological Public Education, a General Overview. In this paper, I'll be looking at the role of archaeological exhibitions in disseminating archaeological education to the public. We find that archaeological heritage is a very important product in understanding our past human cultures. The heritage that is represented in form of artifacts that in large aspects are preserved, are showcased or displayed in our museums for the public to be able to see them, to learn from them, as well as appreciate them. Archaeological exhibits are undoubtedly a powerful visual means of educating the public about the past. And therefore, in my paper, I looked at an array of exhibits that you get in a museum in form of portraits, in form of artifacts that are displayed in what we call the glass encasements, exhibits in trays, as well as digital exhibits, not to forget the audio visual guide systems that are found in a museum, and they are used to enhance a learning experience within the museum environment. And you find that in the recent year, in the recent years, museums have developed into multidimensional organizations that collect, preserve, and display objects which are of interest to the general community. And of late, museums have adapted to a consumer-oriented world and have been competing for our attention with other leisure activities. And therefore, museums have proved themselves worthy of the visitors' time and attention by developing quality exhibitions. Through their tangible objects, museums display information contained in them and what they mean to the global world. Other institutions also deal with information, but it is only the museum that collects, preserves, research, and publicly display objects as essential functions of their existence. Museum exhibitions have in intent to advance institutional mission by displaying collections to the public for them to be able to view them, by providing public education experiences, as well as providing public trust. And one major specific goal of the museum exhibitions is to change attitudes. So when people go and observe these exhibits, they change their attitude on the way they view them, maybe in the world, and the way they see them in the museum, simply because they're able to modify behavior and they're able to learn from them in an aspect of increasing knowledge. And we find that exhibitions are the most powerful and important tools that direct what we call visual communication in every museum. As people visit museums, they interact with the museum exhibitions. This draws a close relationship between exhibitions and the museum audience. More often, public perception of a museum is based on their experience within the exhibitions inside. Right, that exhibitions allow the public to develop a near approach to collections that stimulates curiosity in them, and they are able to develop interest. The public are also able to identify with the museums as a result of the displays that they are able to see being displayed or being showcased there. However, museums have many ways and techniques of communicating with the public, but the most special and unique method is the display of their exhibits. When you look at a museum, we can be able to define it as an institution that cares for a collection of artifacts and other objects of scientific artistic, cultural, or historical importance, and makes them available for public viewing through exhibits. And these exhibits may be there on a permanent basis or probably on a temporal basis. Therefore, a museum becomes a place where one can be able to spend time creatively, fruitfully, giving you as a visitor the opportunity to enjoy yourself and awaken your mind on cultural and historical issues. During a museum visit, learning can easily cause excitement among children, raising the chances of success for those children that face difficulties in learning in school environment, and simultaneously creating new ways of interpreting the course of history. So we go back. I had said that we find that these are school-going children having visited a museum, and this photo was taken in the National Museums of Kenya. This high school that I met when I was doing my study there, and these girls were given an exhibit in form of a stone artifact. They were given a chance to be able to hold. You can see the way they're embracing it and they're happy. And you find that in the process of touching, holding it, this harnesses the process of learning. That is plate 1.2, 1.1, 1.2. Again, these are boys, school-going high school boys. Those are bones that are displayed there in the museum, and they are learning from them. You find that what is in the information pertaining to those bones is displayed in form of a portrait. So they are reading from the portrait there and writing notes. 1.3. Again, had mentioned the aspect of glass encasement, where exhibits are displayed in what we call glass encasements. These are the same school, the same boys. You find that they are observing exhibits through a glass encasement. So the exhibits are in glass, they are protected there, and therefore the general public, as well as anyone who visits the museum, is able to observe them through an encasement. 1.4. Again, the same school, the girls' school, you can see they're observing artifacts in a glass encasement, and they are writing notes pertaining the same. So we continue. We say that you find that teaching with objects, because this is an aspect of teaching with objects. Teaching with objects and photographs, these are, photographs that we are seeing the portraits in the museum, enhances the school curriculum in a variety of ways. These materials can engage students who do not respond well to written materials. They can be used to reinforce material covered in other media, and this can connect students with their own environment and their culture, as well as other cultures. This creates what we call a direct sensory connection between learners and their subjects, and this results to new levels of interest and attention. This also creates students with high levels of visual literacy that they are able to observe and create knowledge, and understand or derive information from what is observed in form of exhibits. It also offers a direct experience for students. Teaching with objects can also help students achieve better understanding of the topics presented, perhaps offering them a leadership role among themselves. Bringing objects into classrooms, like now we find that when these students have gone visiting the museum, you are bringing the classroom, bringing the object to the classroom. Bringing objects into classrooms brings a feeling of resonance and the personal experiences that transform the experience of learning. And this act of decoding an object can help students to develop transferable skills, such as critical thinking, as well as communication skills. Objects now in form of exhibits here. They are a very powerful tool to facilitate concepts which help students to develop high level of reasoning. This encourages students to develop their own questions about the items they see as they explore them. Images and objects can be a starting point around which to have a conversation about the cultural context. So what made these objects? Pointing out, your students will be pointing out the different types of objects that they have been able to see in the museum, the images, the choice of color, and this creates opportunity for students to make personal connections to the materials probably that were used to come up with those exhibits. Archaeological museums usually favor the idea of the exhibition as a communicator of ideas about the past. Archaeological objects have also eidetic or artistic value, personal heritage, or a spiritual value. According to Tescan, in the year 2007, he argues that museums can be an extremely valuable source of creativity, particularly for organizations such as where we have the art galleries or photography exhibitions, as many people who visit museums get inspired and subsequently want to try such activities by themselves. Objects arouse students' curiosity. You can see when that photo, we have been able to see students being given a chance to be able to embrace an exhibit. You can see the way they are happy. So this arouses their curiosity, evokes memories, and motivates them to ask questions and seek answers. This deepens the process of learning. Observation makes it possible to assess the degree of correspondence between what we call the model visitor and the model user. The model visitor is the one the curator have in mind when they set up an exhibition or they prepare a visit. A visit and for whom they work out their communication strategies. The model user is the result of the actual encounter with the exhibit. So when the public or probably students encounter the exhibit, and it becomes a way that they are able to try and predetermine the way that object was used. Museums facilitate learning experiences with works of art and cultivate global perspectives and an appreciation of the diversity of cultures, ideas, and human experiences. Students who visit museums often develop appreciation for their cultural organization simply because museum exhibits inspire interest in the area of study, as well as the time period or an idea, but there is more going in the museum other than, there's more going in the museum regarding the aspect of education. The museum experience is so fascinating, it is so informative, as well as educative to the students, as well as to the general public at large. From the visitor's point of view, according to Hennes, 2002, there is a sort of, or he argues, or he compares it to what we call an experience model. An experience model that has three efforts that we call symbolic engagement in a museum. And these efforts, Hennes refers to them as spaces. These efforts are three. We have what we call the dream space, the pragmatic space, as well as the cognitive space. The dream space is a field of interaction between the objects and the viewers of objects. So when you visit a museum, you find that the way you interact with the exhibit. And you find that in a museum, a dream space or in a dream space, there is flow of images. Like now this one, we can refer to it as a dream space. There is flow of images because if it happen, maybe if 1.2, plate 1.2, these are images, photos, name them. That's what we mean. There is flow. There's flow of images, which are highly personal, sometimes luring, sometimes surprising. You know, when you go to the museum, you see some of the images even surprise you. In the pragmatic space, on the other hand, this is the field of activity in which physical presence rather than objects has meaning, implying that in the pragmatic space, going to a museum is a social event simply because when you visit a museum, you get other visitors that you're able to learn from them in the process of interaction. In the cognitive space, this is the field that corresponds to rational thought. The rational thought is the space that is defined by symbols that are manipulated by the viewer in such a way to lead to what we call, or towards cognition, or to lead to education, or to lead to learning. Museums present material culture to be viewed. And in the process of presenting material culture to be viewed by the general public or anybody who visits the museum, we refer to the museums as sites of spectacle exhibitory spaces. They utilize the objects of the past as tools to be able to generate knowledge and thereby enlighten the minds of the public. Museums also assemble objects in a way that the choice of objects, their placement, or placement meaning where they are placed, where they are positioned, they are able to construct meaning, or they're able to construct a narrative. And in so doing, you find that those who visit the museum as visitors, they are able to engage both with the objects in form of exhibits, they're able to engage with the images, and they are able to generate knowledge or to generate information from them. Visual culture is concerned with the display, vision, and visuality. And this focuses on the relationship between objects and the subject. That is what is seen and who is seeing it. We call it seen and the seer. According to Hopper, Greenhill in the year 2005, he adds that interpretation of visual culture in museums may be considered from 2 points of view. That the first point is that of the curator and that of the visitor, where curators display objects in groups along with associated images and text, and thereby produce interpretations for visitors. On the other hand, visitors make their own interpretation from those objects. And therefore, in so doing, a museum becomes a learning environment in one way or another. In conclusion, I concluded that all exhibitions have a central point, or have a central theme or a central topic that defines them. When exhibitions function strongly as a communicator of ideas, it seeks to convey additional messages that elaborate on that theme and provide new information or perspectives. In an ideal exhibition, the heart of the exhibition is the set of messages, narratives, or facts that the exhibition makers wish to deliver. Artifacts are typically surrounded by context, provided by words and images. You know, the context is that you find that 1.2, plate 1.2, and you look at the plate 1.2, those are bones there. These are artifacts. You find that they are surrounded by words and images. You find that the wordings pertaining them, they are well put and hung in form of portraits. The artifacts are chosen for their ability to support and help carry the message. They need not to be rare or unique. They can be familiar items. They can also be replicas. They can be reproductions. They can also be copies. But the key aim is to be able to communicate ideas, not to display important artifacts. Exhibitions that stress ideas tend to have educational goals and are more common. When objects capture attention and awe with the unique and captivating qualities, their viewers experience wonder. I take you back to plate 1.1, where we have seen these girls, high school girls, embracing or holding that exhibit in form of a stone tool. So you find that this object captures their attention because they are all holding it, very, very happy about it. And in so doing, this, to the viewers, as students, they experience wonder. You know, wondering is, you know, they feel resonance, they are happy about it. Resonance makes the museum visitor wonder at the object's context. Now you see they are wondering about the context of that object, considering the bodies that touched it, who touched this artifact, the people who valued it, the people who made it, the desire that transformed from the maker to the curator or to other people. Wonder makes the visitor feel the object resonate within himself or herself. And this experience leads to yearning for intimacy of knowledge. Recommendations: archaeology museums should encourage, as it continuously does, the visitor to touch selected items in controlled settings, such as special display or a tray of handling specimens. This provides, or this can also provide handling samples of the materials that the object was made of, for example, in the case of stone tools. Exhibitions are environments in which complex interactions occur among visitors and objects. They are also places of experience, as explained by individuals who visit museums or who visit them. The experience arises from activity that leads to a situation in which an individual is moved to interact with his or her environment. When it comes to schools, they should instill the love of the museum in their students, since it is a place where children can be able to obtain knowledge of their cultural heritage and historical identity. The museums should also take into consideration the school curriculum and act in accordance with it in showcasing or in displaying their exhibits. Generally, there is an enormous need for direct communication between schools and museums in order to offer children a chance to see, sometimes even touch, play with these exhibits, read what is contained or what is displayed in these exhibits, and express their feelings and emotions when they visit a museum. The teaching process from museum exhibits mixes learning and entertainment, and as a result, museum ceases to be a place that promotes passive and oppressive knowledge.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tabitha, for this very interesting and insightful presentation. Thank you very much for it. We have learned quite a lot about museums and their role in exhibitions. What I have noticed, and I'm very happy about it, is that you have told us a lot about how students, high school students, through museums, learn about archaeology. This is very important in archaeology because in Kenya, and like in some other countries, students get to know about archaeology only when they come at the university. Some even just hear the word archaeology at the university. Therefore, when they go to the museum and are able to see objects and interact with them, it becomes very, very important. And that's something which we should really be happy about. Through this presentation, we have learned about the various types of exhibitions which are offered in the museum. We have learned about important channels of exhibition, especially the digital one. This is very critical nowadays, especially in an age where we are having challenges such as COVID-19, where it was even impossible to go to the museum almost a whole year. Therefore, it's very important that museums have developed such channels that we can be able to use so that we learn about archaeology and archaeological materials. You have shown us pictures about how students are able to interact directly with the museums, I mean with the objects. What about other audiences, like tourists, common person, people, different types of audiences go to the museum. So I don't know whether you just specialize on students or you deliberately just left out the other audiences. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I want to give you an opportunity, those of you who are here directly, so that you can be able to ask Tabitha questions. And we'll have at least 6 questions from the audience here. And if there are others after that, we will go then to online audiences if we have some. Therefore, David, we shall start with the chair is here. So David, then Ben. Who else? Okay, Chair, welcome.
Very well, Tabitha. I'm learning. I'm not an archaeologist, and I should say I've learned a lot. And welcome, my brother Geoffrey Sang, our presenter for the next week. He probably came to see the environment before he comes on much more strongly next week. Now, Tabitha, I have 2 very simple questions because I'm very ignorant when it comes to things, museums and archaeology. But interestingly, I've been involved in writing storylines for a number of exhibitions. The history of Kenya Gallery, the National Museums. Today I was directly involved. The Judiciary Museum was involved in writing the exhibition. The Asian Heritage subsection of the Kenya National Museums that is coming up. I'm actually involved in writing, but still, I do that as a historian. Now, my first question is very interesting from your discussion. Is it museums that produce a society, or is it a society that produces museums? because from your argument, I get the impression that you seem to suggest that museums influence. They have a likelihood to influence the way people think, the way people live, the way people look at themselves. What is the what produces the other? Is it the society, or is it the museum, or is it a question of chicken egg relationship, as sociologists will put it? That is number one. Number two, another simple one. You know, are museums socio cultural or scientific institutions? I followed very keenly the debates between Dr. Richard Leakey and a number of officials of government, particularly those who were directly in charge of running the Kenya National Museums, when Dr. Leakey was not very, very happy that the museum, particularly here in Nairobi, was increasingly becoming cultural instead of a scientific institution that he felt it is. What is your take on this? Thank you.
David, please.
Asante sana, Gilbert. And before I make my comments, I'd like to introduce the chair to the first year students at Kikuyu who are online. So those who managed to make it, the gentleman who has just been speaking is the chair of the department. So having said that, I want to thank Tabitha for a very good presentation, and also for the comments that the rapporteur Gilbert has presented to us. As I was listening to Tabitha, I kept on wondering whether she's talking about museums that we are familiar with in Kenya, or museums that are in Wonderland, or in some other place that we are not able to identify with. And this especially is informed by my experience, especially when we take students to the field, and sometimes we have to stop at some sites and some museums. And then you ask them, when were you last here? Or when did you go to a museum last? And then they say, during a trip when we were in class 4, and now I'm at the university and I've never gone back. And even the general public, you ask somebody, even in this audience, we can be able to do a sampling here, like, how many of you have been to the Nairobi Museum? And when was that? How many people do go to the museums regularly? And the answer would be very kidogo people. And the question would be, why is it that we don't have, Tabitha, why is it that we don't have repeat visitations to our museums? The second one, which is a comment rolled, together with a question, is when you visit some of our museums, and I want to pick specifically some of the coast sites, because our categorization has got what we call site museums, and then we've got the museums, like for Jesus, for example. And then when you get into this particular facility, which is a government facility, public facility, ukiingia ndani, up to the very last point when you are exiting is when you get to see something that is indigenous. Everything else would make you think that you are somewhere in Arabia or Oman, and especially Oman. What is it? What are we missing so that we can be able to also showcase ourselves, so that the museum doesn't appear like a facility which is being used either knowingly or unknowingly to perpetuate colonialism, especially cultural colonialism? And in that case, then what would be the role of the museum towards the decolonization of culture and heritage? One of our eminent scholars, Kenyan, and Dr. George Abungu, has been one of the foremost pioneers in ICOMOS, proponing for the establishment, more or less like replacement of the current setup of museum, which is Western-based or based on Western philosophy, to be replaced with what he calls living museums. And we've got quite a number of test runs here in Kenya. We've got one at Loyangalani. We've got something else at Mfangano Island. I don't know whether that's the direction we should be able to go, okay, towards living museums as opposed to dead museums. Dead museums in the sense that you go there and you see things that are just like you know, and they are not living, they are not giving life. Okay. Can we, or maybe perhaps maybe have some kind of hybrid so that museums also play as cultural centers, something like that. Okay. Then the last one is, how can museums protect intangible heritage and indigenous knowledge? And we have a lot of that. We have got things that have been called witchcraft and whatever, and all these kinds of things, depending on which persuasion you are religious. But we've got all these indigenous things that can be described to all kinds of things, which we know worked and probably still work anyway. What would be the role of the museum to protect these indigenous knowledges? Because ultimately they get stolen by these fellows from wherever they come from, then they bring it to us and then we embrace them again. Our own things. Thank you.
Ben, Dr. Ndogoto.
Thank you very much, Chairman, for the session, and thank you very much, Tabitha, for your presentation. A good one indeed. But I may have one question in relation to what you define as public. I'm looking at public in general terms. And looking at your presentation and the exhibits that we are talking about in the museum, you know, a museum is an open environment where anyone else can go. And therefore, if you look at the exhibits, there are so many exhibits. There are archaeological exhibits, there are exhibits from other, you know, cultures and all that. So when we have these exhibits showcased in the museum, is the audience that is going to these exhibits already predetermined? So that if we have people coming from perhaps Rwanda who just want to say, I'm going to the National Museums of Kenya, are they likely to go to an archaeological museum? Or what could elicit interest so that they can go to a particular exhibition? So I think my simple question is, would we have experts that teach about archaeological education, but then how do we get this audience, apart from the students? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Gona, please, you can ask her, then perhaps she can respond.
Yeah, a quick one. Maybe this has been asked in different way, but who makes the decision to take an artifact to the museum? Who makes that decision? And secondly, maybe controversial, are museums misinforming and therefore not educating? Thank you.
Anybody else, or you want to address those questions first? Yes.
Thank you. My name is Peter Oluoch. Madam Tabitha said that museum enhances learning. When children go there, they get excited, enhances creativity like photographic exhibitions. My question is, that museum enhances learning to what degree? How do you measure that it enhances learning by 30%, 20%, 80%, 100%? How do you measure the degree of learning enhancement among the school children? Then there was this issue of the lions of Tsavo, the man-eating lions of Tsavo. I don't know whether those lions were brought back. So maybe it's part of those museum thing. Then the other thing is that I wanted to ask is, a while back, someone also just mentioned it. The Wazungus took away some of these African artifacts. And I was watching one of the movies, one of the Nigerian movies, where to the Wazungus, those things mean nothing. But to the Nigerians, the Yoruba, those artifacts were kind of being worshipped. So are there plans to bring those things back, or we just forget about them? The Wazungus went with them, because you can go to Europe, by the way, and learn African cultures there. And I'm wondering, why should you learn African cultures in Europe? So thank you so much.
Thank you. I think, do you know ask questions? Okay, David, You can ask a question.
I have one.
Thank you, Chair. Mine isn't a question as such, although it can be. Following to what Dr. Gona just raised, who decides that this artifact should be taken to the museum? And do you think the museums are safe, even for those exhibits that you talk about? I'm saying this from the point of the 1954 Convention on Protection of Cultural Property and all those museums, that they should be far away from military installations so that in case of any attack, those artifacts are safe or they can be migrated to other areas. Do you think that the artifacts in museums are safe? And in relation to the question that Dr. Ben asked about the public, does the public even know the role of that museum? Or to you, the public are school-going children? Thank you.
Our senior professor Home, did you have a question? Okay. Tabitha, I hope it. Okay. Madam Tabitha.
One more. Can I ask one more?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the questions. I will start by addressing Mr. Wafula's question. Who are the other audiences? The other audiences here is the general public. Anyone who is visiting the museum as a visitor is an audience. But my research dwelt more on school-going children, and that is why you find that I displayed more on students interacting with artifacts or with exhibits. Yet, plate 1.4. 1.4, we were able to see by the side a foreign visitor who had gone leaning on the wall, observing the artifacts at a distance. Meaning, but you find that at that juncture, my concern was not the public in form of the general public, but my concern was the public in form of school-going children. Number two, I answer my chair's question, Dr. Kenneth Obogi. You know, Dr. Ken, sometimes his questions are a little bit tough, but will become more tougher this time. He's gone asking me, is it the museum that produces? Is it the museum that produces society, or is it society that produces museum? It is the society that produces museums. Why? This is because it is the society that produces these artifacts that are displayed in these museums for the future generations to be able to see them and learn from them. So it is the society that produces museums. Question number two, coming from my chair. Are museums sociocultural or scientific institutions? They are both. You find that in museums are sociocultural institutions. I give an example of our National Museums of Kenya here. When you go to the National Museums of Kenya, it displays our cultures, the 42 ethnic communities in this country. And you find that, again, our museums are scientific institutions because this is where research or studies are done. This is actually in the National Museums of Kenya. This is where I'm doing my study in a scientific way. And you find that in the process of going to the museum, I also interact with the scholars coming from the other universities who are doing this study in the same museum. So they are both sociocultural institutions as well as scientific institutions. I go to Mwalimu Kule's question. He's asking me, which museum am I talking about? Is this museum in Kenya? Mwalimu Kule, I'm talking about the National Museums of Kenya. The National Museums of Kenya have been given a new look. If you happen to pay a visit in the present, things have really changed. There is digitization of exhibits. And this is there is a lot of portraits displaying a lot of information coming from exhibits from the diverse regions of this country. So I was referring to the NMK. You have asked, why don't we have repeat visitation in the museum? This is the work of the Department of Education in the museum, to be able to improve their display of exhibits so that they are able to capture these exhibits with our sound, so that the moment students feel entertained, they will be able to pay a visit again. Again, it's the Department of Education in the National Museums of Kenya that is supposed to liaise with learning institutions and let them know what they are showcasing and for the schools to be able to prepare visitations to these museums. Again, the Department of Education should liaise with the curriculum. Like now we have the CBC curriculum, should liaise with it so that it is in line with the curriculum, so that the moment this will be able to increase more visitations because it becomes a learning environment. How can museums be able to protect intangible heritage? The intangible heritage, we are saying that the museum can be able to work hand in hand with the community in the process of locating this intangible heritage and know how to rescue them from damage. Because some of these intangible heritage are in areas where we have human encroachment, and with the increase in human population, they are at risk of getting destroyed, to give room for cultivation, to give room for human settlement. So it is the work of the museum to be able to work hand in hand with the community. I go to Dr. Nyanchoga's question. He's asking me, is this audience predetermined when they are going to the museum? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. No, in this essence, you find that many are the times that when we have audience visiting museums, they face it in form of a surprise. They do not know what to get. But I am saying again, in Kenya, as an example, it should be the role of the Department of Education to be able to prepare leaflets and circulate them to the schools so that the students are able to know what to expect when they are going to the museum, and as well prepare questions in advance on what they are likely to expect there. I go to Dr. George Gona's question. He's asking, who makes a decision to take an artifact to the museum? You find that the moment these artifacts are discovered by the general public, the general public have no mandate to go pick them and take them to the museum. In various regions of this country, you find that we have what we call regional museums. And with the devolved governance, you find that the community need to report to the regional museum of the presence of an artifact in a particular region, so that it is well secured well without causing more damage, because probably the artifact is in fragmented manner. And probably if we go just picking it anyhow, before we get to the museum, it is not making sense. It have gotten more deteriorated, it have become more destroyed. So it is the work of the community to work in hand with the regional museums of the locality to tell the presence of these artifacts so that they can be secured by regional museums. Is a museum an informing environment, or is it an educating environment? To me, I feel that the moment you inform, you are able to learn. You learn from what you are informed of. So it is both an informing and a learning environment or educating environment. I go to Mr. Olwat's question. He's asking, how do you measure the degree of learning in a museum? The degree of learning in a museum, you may not be able to measure it at that particular time. This measuring may occur in schools. Probably if there is a question that it touches on a visitation or touches on what was observed in a museum, then the instructor, who is the teacher, can be able now to measure the understanding of the content in comparison to what was observed in a museum. Olwatch is also asking, Europeans took our artifacts, and some of them were taken by Nigerians who are using them, or they are worshiping them. You find that in Kenya, we have what we call the heritage, the Museum Heritage Act. At the Museum Heritage Act, the act is supposed to protect our heritage. So again, it's the work of the museum to be able to work hand in hand with the government to be able to know which are these artifacts that left this country so that they can be able to come back safely. I go to my colleague's question, this is David. David is asking me, are museums safe for exhibits? I tell you they are safe. Because again, I'll pose a question. Is an exhibit safe in your house? It is not safe. And if you keep an exhibit in your house, it does not derive any meaning. Because in your house, you go keep it in a cabinet. Who is seeing it? Nobody. And you find that exhibits are used as they are used as learning objects. So if I keep it in my house, who is learning from it? Nobody. So museums are safe places to be able to store our exhibits because we cannot store them in our houses because they are meant for learning. He's asking me also, are the public meaning school going children? I've just explained that. My study was more on school going children, and therefore the public means anybody in the society. Anybody in the society, but at this juncture, my concern was not anybody who was visiting the museum. My concern was students because the study was more on students. But the general public, again, also have a lot of meaning in terms of visitations in these museums.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tabitha. Yes, before we go to online audience, if we have another question, you can raise your hand now. Yes, sir. Then Professor. Yes, you can ask now. Your name, then.
Yes, thank you very much for that great presentation. My name is Godfrey Sang. Mine is actually a comment as well, and probably echoing a question that you probably did not answer. One comment about who puts these artifacts in museum. Community plays a big role in that. We have a Koitalel Museum in Nandi Hills, for instance, in Nandi County, and I took part at some point in putting in some findings in the place that I had come across in my sojourn in Europe, and which were of relevance to the Kalenjin people. And my friend in Coventry, at the University of Coventry, called Kimnyango Serone, together with Dr. Sambu, were able to identify some of the artifacts that had been taken from Koitalel, Samoei, which were lying in storage at the British Museum, and managed to convince British authorities to bring those items back to Kenya, and which are proudly displayed at the Koitalel Museum. So yes, community helps to populate this. I also did, together with the said individual, Serone at Coventry, we're able to visit the son, the aging son of Menatagan, who is very crucial in the story of Koitalel Samoei. And he was very happy to donate some of his father's collections that are now actually displayed in the same museum. And at Nandi Hills. Now, to my question, it's about really echoing what a gentleman had asked earlier about do we actively follow some of the migrated museum articles that have gone to Europe through our long colonial experience in Kenya. Of course, the museum that we have at Nairobi was started by the colonials back in 1925. So how have we actively done as a community, as a nation, to try and get back some of the artifacts that were migrated by the colonials? Reason I'm saying this is because actually there's quite a bit of stuff that the British Museum has kept in storage, not even on display, you know, it's not helping them, but could have been on display in this particular place and are of help to us. Secondly, do we have interactive cooperation with other museums across the world? Like now the Chicago Field Museum, where the gentleman talked about, which holds the lions or the man-eaters of Tsavo, is in the Chicago Field Museum. Do we have any relationship with them? And can we even, like, for instance, take some of the artifacts on loan, for instance, because like the Egyptian Museum has been actively trying to get the British Museum to even give them some time with some of their migrated artifacts. Of course, you know, the British looted quite a bit of the pharaonic artifacts that are proudly displayed at the British Museum. Can we have an interaction or a sort of cooperation model that can be beneficial to us as well as the holders of these artifacts? Thank you.
Yes.
If you allow me a minute, I'll clarify the question I asked about whether museums are socio-cultural institutions or scientific institutions. You know, I was coming from the backdrop of the politics of museum spaces in our country, and looking at some of the dialectics that have shaped, number one, what we display, and I think that's a question Dr. Gona was raising, and who it is meant for, and what is communicated, has been really the contention between, for example, the two isms that have shaped our identity as a country. One, of course, is imperialism, and the other one is nationalism. And there is a feeling, particularly if you read the works of Karega Munene. There is one I really enjoyed reading quite a few years back, where he examines museums as spaces for selecting, ordering, and erasing identity, where you find that you know, what one could loosely call as the imperialist apologists always will want to see the museums as scientific institutions, while the locals, the local political elite, will want to see museums as spaces to promote the socio-cultural identity, as a way of repudiating the long-held notions that there were no cultures in Africa to talk about, and the universalizing notions of Westernism that pushed the African cultures to the back scenes. That is really where I was coming from, more or less the politics that informs not just the establishment, but the experts that we see in our national museums and what we need to learn from them, and things like those. Maybe that's something we can you know, look at a little bit more later. Thank you.
Let me say something about that chair. In the
Yes, can I ask one question?
Sorry for that. Let me say something about that, Chair. In the history of museums, we learned that museums really cropped up after the Renaissance. And from the 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, there have been a lot of changes in the way they present their materials to the public. First of all, museums were meant, or they were geared towards serving elites, a small creme de la creme in society. A lot of interest was not given to the common person. As such, in archaeology, for example, most of the materials that were put in museums were meant to serve archaeologists themselves in analysis and so on. There was not very much concern about people who would come and see them, like is the case now with the modern museum. And in fact, there have been debates with some scholars arguing that materials stored in the museum should really be for scientific purposes, and that modern museums are overemphasizing the role of bringing in the people to observe them. So the use of museum materials has been a topical issue of concern. And this is also about colonial ideology, imperialism, the imperialism chair you have been talking about, whereby museums at first were meant to serve the imperialists. Nowadays, we have the modern museum, which is people-centered. Focus is on people, the common people who come to the museum. And that's why there could be an issue. I just wanted to comment something about it. Professor, you had a question?
I have more of a comment. I think we are ignoring one very important thing, that is the Constitution, that museums should not be what we call museums today. All museums have been delegated to the counties. They are supposed to portray the aspirations of the counties. That is, people there, their heritage, their history. They should represent the history of the populations at county level. Ideally, county governments are supposed to come up with museums. But in the current setup, and according to the Constitution 2010, the museum, all the museums should be at a county government. That process has taken long because county governments are not quite prepared. And when it is all settled, and I hope it will take a short time, they will be under the tutorage of the county governments. Now, the museum as we know it today will be about monuments, those items on display that cannot be moved. So ideally we'll have a body that will deal with monuments, items that cannot be moved. All the movable items will be in the control of county governments. Of course, there are issues, and that is where now the question asked by Masika about whether museums are safe will come in. But of course, I think when this is effected as according to the Constitution, I think we'll have museums that are managed by the local community. The tangible and intangible heritage will be managed at that level, and they will become what we are saying cultural, in the sense that they will be representing people and they train what Tabitha talked about. learning from those objects, will be learning from their history. And ideally, that transformation is what we are eager to have. On movement of objects from Europe, from other places, the challenge that has been there is funds. Having enough funds to get those objects that were taken away during the colonial period. Because the whole process, the legal process is involved, because in some cases it involves legal procedures, and the actual repatriation of those objects requires that some funds must be available. Otherwise, and unfortunately, some of the objects are classified as African objects. And therefore, there must also be people who are physically identifying those particular objects and giving them particular classification. But generally, I think that is my comment. It's not a question. Thank you.
Can I come in for my
Prof,
question?
Maybe you can help us, although the question was addressed.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I go on?
Who can help
With my
this
question?
Charles Leshore is asking, how can the UN interact with upcoming museums that struggle to showcase information through exhibitions when technical, and how? The question is written in a confusing way. Let me repeat. How can the UN interact with the upcoming museums that struggle to showcase information through exhibitions when technical? And how, anyway, I don't know if you get what he's saying. Then another question by Rob Kipkurui to everyone. Great presentation. Indeed, museums are a great source of information. In your opinion, have Kenyan museums implemented digitization of its exhibits? I think, Tabitha, you answered this question, but you may repeat. Yes,
Can I comment so that she can answer the same?
Yes, Munyu, yes. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Munyu. My question or an observation is in an add-on on what Mwalimu David Masika mentioned about the question he was posing. How safe are our artifacts? And I link it with Madam Tabitha's observation that there has been a change for those who have been visiting the National Museum. But there is a structural inadequacy I was able to find at the National Archives. It has not had a board of directors for the last 11 years. And I think that question was raised in Parliament, last Parliament. I don't know how far the ministry has gone with that issue. So I'd like to know from Mwalimu Tabitha whether we now have a fully constituted board at the National Archives, because we know that the board is generally the custodian of artifacts. Thank you.
Isn't that?
Can I ask a question?
Leshore, please ask.
Oh, thank you so much for this presentation. It was very educative. And as MAM Museum and Center for Indigenous Culture located in Kajiado, we were really able to learn a lot in terms of museum and the roles. The presenter actually did a very good presentation, but I think most of these things that we talk are theory. And why am I saying theory? Because I think we lack that connection between the government, between the national museums, and those upcoming museums in rural areas. When Tabitha talked about exhibits in a house, I have an experience that I have exhibits in a house. When I was working, I collected I've been collecting a lot of artifacts that I felt they were not safeguarded. They are going to disappear. So when I lost my job in 2020, I went to the store and got all the artifacts that I've been collecting, and I realized I've invested quite a lot. And the MAM Museum, of course, has its own objectives. There are many things that we do, but one of the things that we do is to talk about repatriation, research on those particular artifacts that are now located in Europe. And these are basically the indigenous artifacts. Number two, we also, as a museum, we focus on research and education, but also on threats and pressures affecting, prehistoric sites and some of the lands that have a lot of sites of heritage. And when now we look at the museums, and we are being told that they should be living museums, then we feel that we have the challenges. Because devolution, and I think one presenter talked about it, devolution is only in paper. In the last 10 years, in Kajiado, if I give you an example, we have no single museum that was started or was supported. We have community museums, we have private museums, and all these people have something in common in terms of they have artifacts that they want to showcase and through exhibitions. And when they're in a house, if I give you my own example, is the fact that I started a museum in Encasements, and I rented a house for it. Now, Kenyans, it was during COVID, Kenyans will come to the museum and say, can we see what is inside so that you can tell the others so that they can come? And I decided that they should just come in and see the things and go and tell others, and if not tell others, it's still okay. And in 2022, I started another one in Kajiado in Rongai, thinking that I was trying to build up on municipality museum. In Olergesile, I still have the cultural museum because of the best tourism village. That was an award from the United Nations World Tourism Organization. And surely, we don't have even the capacity at the county level. Devolution, yes, in the paper, but technical was not devolved. You have no scholars, you don't have archaeologists, you don't have paleontologists, you don't have exhibitors who can help you. And that was why I was asking the question, can the University of Nairobi connect with these museums so that they can bring students to practical and even exhibit these products? Otherwise, in terms of practicality and reality, such museums are not devolved at all. And even if they want to devolve, they don't really prioritize museums and galleries and exhibitions. What the counties will prioritize is roads, water, issues of water and sanitation. So how do we move from there? That there's a total disconnect between private community museums and the government and the National Museums of Kenya that has not been devolved. So if you go to the county level, you'll get a person employed in the tourism or maybe a department with the name tourism and heritage, but he has no idea what tourism is, what heritage is. So how do we move from there in the context of the 2010 Constitution? Thank you.
Oh, can you please? Can you give us your contacts, please? Get more.
My contacts. Are you asking for my contacts?
Can make a follow-up?
Yes, my contact is MAM Museum and Center for Cultural Indigenous Culture.
Right on the chat, the contacts.
Oh, thank you very much.
Tabitha, you want to make comments? Welcome.
Okay, thank you. Let me try to address the questions that you have raised to my level best. I'll try to my level best because some of them sounds to be very tough. Mr. Godfrey is asking me, do we have a follow-up for artifacts that migrated from this country, probably during the colonial era, or probably some of them that we can use the word in archaeology that have been vandalized by researchers who come to do a study here? Again, I'm going to answer this question that you find that in the case of Kenya, you find that museums are struggling with the challenges of funding. If there is no funds, then we find that it becomes very difficult for them to be able to have personnel to organize themselves to go look for those funds. Again, when you look at the museums, I give an example of the National Museums of Kenya, it is understaffed. So the staff are too minimal, probably, to deal with the exhibits and to chase those ones that have gotten lost. So probably for those who have gotten lost, they have become a non-concern to them because there is no one to be able to deal with them. And when you look at, again, in the national museums, as well as the regional museums, as Mr. Leshore is raising, is that quite a number of these regional museums are manned by people who are not experts in the field of archaeology. And therefore, if you have persons who are not well versed in the discipline of archaeology, it becomes very difficult for them to be able to deal with such challenges. The second question that Mr. Geoffrey is raising, do we have incorporation? Maybe then I give an example, maybe I'm assuming that you're asking, do our museums incorporate with other museums in Kenya? You find that the incorporation, I came to realize that when it comes to the regional museums in Kenya, they are on their own. They're on their own.
No, I think you asked whether they cooperate with other
yes, I'm saying when it comes to cooperating with other museums in the outside, there is a lot of cooperation that is taking place, because you find that there is quite a lot of research, research collaboration that takes place with the staff of the National Museums of Kenya and other universities in the West. That one is there.
Zara.
The chair is asking, this is, Dr. Kenneth is asking me. Can we take some artifacts on loans? I think that where we have reached in Kenya, for the many times that I've been able to do a study or I've visited the National Museums of Kenya, I have not heard of any loaning that artifacts can be borrowed. They can be borrowed by the West. Neither have I heard that maybe the West can be able to borrow from us. Actually, they are not aware of that. Well, probably, Mr. Geoffrey, when you get a chance, it's a very good idea. You can talk to them. Can we be able to do that form of an exchange? I go to the question that is asked by my chair of the department, this is Dr. Kenneth. He's asking, the exhibits in the museum, who are they meant for? These exhibits are meant for the general public who pay a visit to this museum. And I give an example of the National Museums of Kenya. I had raised this, that when you go to the National Museums of Kenya with a new face, it displays the 47, the more than 42 communities, ethnic communities that we have in this country. And therefore, in so doing, it is able to promote what we call an aspect of inclusivity, nationalism. Because when you go to the National Museums of Kenya, you find that there is quite a lot that is displayed from your community. So it is meant for anybody who pays a visit, whether from this country or maybe coming from the outside, because even from the outside, there is quite a lot that they can be able to learn from our museums. Then Dr. Ken asked, what do we learn from exhibits in our museum? We can learn more from the museum, from our exhibits in the museum, simply because we can refer to our exhibits as goods of research. And if they are goods of research, they are designed to communicate ideas. And in the process of communicating these ideas, they do so in what we call the visual communication, simply because what you see in using your eyes through this exhibit, it's able to communicate a lot. Maybe who are the users of those exhibits? I go to the online audience. There is one Mr. Kipukirui. Kipukirui is asking, have museums implemented digitization? Mr. Kipukirui, if you happen to get a chance and visit the National Museums of Kenya, digitization is taking place. Digitization is where you find that we have the moving screens, and you find that exhibits keeps on moving with the information pertaining to them. That is quite a lot. And again, when you go to the Twitter handle, as well as the Facebook of the National Museums of Kenya, we are able to get quite a lot of exhibits that are in digital mode, that are well displayed in a museum. I go to Mr. Muniu. Muniu is asking, how safe are our museums? Our museums, this question has been answered by my senior advisor, Professor Ephraim Wahome. He has answered the question that with the Constitution and with the devolved government, if what is stipulated in our Constitution is settled or is put on board, then our museums will become more safer to keep our artifacts, unlike keeping them in our houses. Mr. Leshore is asking me, or he is saying that he's keeping exhibits in his house because after collecting them, maybe probably drew from the surface, or probably he happened to do archaeological excavation and he lost his job. He is keeping them in his house and have found a way of opening a museum to the general public to be able to display these items for them to be able to learn from them. And his question was, probably in the process of answering the question, the way I have written the question, he was asking, he was saying that the house is safe. And to me, probably I may say it is safe or it is not safe, but you find that an exhibit, if it is in your house, has no meaning, because, you know, an exhibit is meant to convey what we call the visual communication. And if you are the one who is seeing it alone, then it is not communicating to anyone. So it needs to be displayed to the public for them to be able to view and learn from it. But you find that he is saying, Leshore is saying that even with the devolved government in Kenya, museums, or there is no correlation or interaction between the national museums, this is the National Museums of Kenya here, the Nairobi National Museum, with the regional museum. And probably I can answer that question in the aspect that the money that is set aside by the government to be able to take care of these museums is too minimal, too little to be able to go as far, even with the devolved government, to take care of these regional museums. And you know, as I think it's Mr. Geoffrey who mentioned this, that when you look at the devolved governance in Kenya, the community concern is, do we have good roads? Do we have water? Do we have good schools? But you find that the museums are abandoned, despite the fact that they are very important learning environments for the growing population, as well as the general public at large. And again, you find that we also have very few archaeologists in Kenya. With the few personnel that we have in Kenya, you find that quite a number of us, we know each other by name. Like now I know that my colleagues here, they have become to teaching. They are all lecturers. And you find that very few, if any, have gone to be able to take care of these museums, and therefore they have been left unattended in one way or another.
Thank you very much, Tabitha. Maybe before I wanted to comment something. I didn't get very clear in the presentation, Tabitha. Hope you can bear with me a little bit. Just wanted some clarification. You see, exhibition represents the last or the final stage in research and interpretation. So what I'm not very clear is about those exhibits, especially when you are showing us the exhibits that were being shown to the students.
You find that when you the National Museums of Kenya here, they have categorized themselves in levels. We have some museum staff who are very well versed in taking around a school going children at very, very lower levels, the kindergarten, they're able to fit in their shoes well. Again, we have others who deal very well with the primary school children, to high school, and again to the general public. So when it comes to this study, these students were accompanied by a museum staff who is an educator. And this educator was able to explain to the students in a language that they were able to understand about those exhibits. And you can see that they were even given a chance to hold, to touch, to embrace, because you find that in so doing, students, when they touch and they embrace, they learn more from it. They feel that an aspect of entertaining the young people, what they learn is able to stick into their mind more.
Thank you very much, Tabitha, for that live presentation. And unless there's a question, maybe just one, and you only that, then we'll call Dr. Ben Njoga to give a vote of thanks.
Colonial pictures. There's the queen, her mother, her sisters. There's every aspect of colonialization still present in our museums. So what do you think is the role of decolonization in the museums? Should the colonial artifacts be included, or should we find a way to channel the different education that comes with colonialism and all its effects, being negative or positive? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tab. you emphasize on digitalization, and the last time I went to the museum, there are some galleries, they insisted that you don't even take a photograph there. And here is Tabitha telling us that they're digitalizing them. So do you think the material that they are putting on soft or digitalizing is safe? Because the reason I asked them, why don't you allow us to take photos? They say, no, these ones are personalized and people can just come in and see. You don't take any photo. In short, how safe is that digital content? Are we not going to see it stolen? And then the same artifacts are replicated in museums, and the Europeans have a characteristic of doing that. So that will then beat the logic of people visiting our museums. How safe is that content that they're digitalizing?
So I'll start with my friend's Mwalimu David Masika's question. He's asking, how safe are these exhibits when they are digitized? Are they not manipulated? I think that's the question that you're asking. You find that when you go to the National Museums of Kenya, the photos of these exhibits are taken just, if probably it's an exhibit where it was found. In archaeology, we use the word in situ, where it was found, the photo is just taken the way it is. There is no manipulation. There are no additionals. There are no cosmetic changes. It is just that. And this, I can be able to ascertain from quite a number of the exhibits that I have been able to see having been digitized in the National Museums. Have I answered your question? So I'm saying that these exhibits, the photographs of these exhibits are taken where they are. So there is no aspect of them having been manipulated. So the photo remains intact. So the other question is from the young girl who is asking, what's the role of decolonization in the museum? You find that decolonization is part of the museum, and it occurs, maybe the way I'm able to understand it, that it occurs in the process of training of staff. So the museum staff are trained in a way that when they visit these museums, you know, there is what we call an approach of welcoming visitors. They are also able to determine what is displayed in their galleries in form of stores. So decolonization is part of the training, to me, of the staff in the way they are able to handle visitors who visit those museums.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tabitha, for your presentation. Indeed, my name is Nyanchoga Ben. I'm an archaeologist by training. I just want to say one thing, that a museum is really a complex environment. A museum is a place where you can find perhaps everything that you need. But I think what she was presenting here is an archaeological museum. So thank you very much. I want to say that that was a very, very insightful presentation. We have learned a lot. I want also to thank all the people, online and physical, or physically here. I can see some of my former students, my sorry here. I taught him long time ago when he was in second year. History, I'm sure he's working somewhere. He has made his way here. I want also to thank those people I have never met, but they are here, who look new. I can see Wafura is here, one of our clerks from the department. Professor Waume. I want to say that personally, I'm very happy because I got a job through Tabitha's class of 2002. I remember Professor Waume then, when I had just finished my master's, I also wanted to home the way George was saying, when Monsieur was talking about giving photo of tanks. There was a class, Archaeology of Southern Africa. There was nobody to teach. And therefore, Professor Waume told me that, can you go to 411 and teach a class of students who are there? I think that is the time she was undergraduate in 2002. I taught for free for 3 months. I met Professor Mutoro, who again asked me, what are you doing here? I told him I'm teaching, but I'm teaching for free. He told me there is no way you can teach for free in the university. He wrote me a part-time letter. So I'm very happy, at least I can see my product. I also supervised our masters together with Wafura, I think, if not Waume, I have forgotten. So, Chairman, I want to thank you very well, indeed very well, because everywhere we go, we are saying that we have a chairperson who is an academician. In fact, so many people are so envious of you in a positive way. I've met people out there in senior saying, hey, you have a chairman who is really an academician. He should even fight for deanship. No, I told them, this man, you know, he has woken some of us, because for me, when I finished my PhD, I thought that I don't want anything now. I've finished. I want to wait and retire from the university, but at least you have rejuvenated my mind. My senior Margaret, thank you very much. Kule, you know, we have done many things together. We have all the secrets. Together, we cannot say anything about each other. So thank you very much. This is a good afternoon. Mwarimu Gona there, our postgraduate coordinator, our engineers here, sound engineers from the church. We are very happy. Our visitor who is presenting next week. And those who are online. I can see a number of people. I'm sure they are listening to me. We want to thank you so much. We have this series of seminars going on until such a time when the chairman will say, this has come to a stop. Otherwise, I don't have any addition other than to say thank you very much.
Okay, friends, just a few quick ones. Our evening is done. We continue with our series next week, and I'm very glad that our presenter next week is right here. My very, very good friend, Geoffrey Sang. Interestingly, we belong to the same faith, and we go to the same church, and we have grown up literally together. And he's going to present something very interesting, which I do not want to preempt. And we are working together on this thing I call Women on Top. There are some aspects we are sharing. When I come up to present, I think at the end of this month or the beginning, it will also come to the picture. So I welcome you for next week. It promises to be as interesting as it has ever been. And as I say always, our seminars are open to the public. They are not just an academic conversation confined to us who belong to the academy. I remember this past week, I had a very interesting discussion or a conversation in our church platform with one brother who felt that historians, we have no place. We delve into abstract things that cannot help anybody. I think from the presentation today, Tabitha, you have probably one point you have proved, and I guess the brother must be listening, is that we have a role to play as historians and archaeologists in shaping the direction that the society goes. Thank you very, very much, as Malim Nyanchoga said, and we hope to see you next week, either online or on site. Thank you.